Meghan is hardly innocent. She's down in the dirt with me, whether she likes it or not.
Stripping Meghan and Andrew of their titles was the right course. I have full confidence in Catherine and William. Their judgment is sound, their loyalty unwavering.
A heavy fog clung to the secluded estate on the outskirts of Westhaven as night settled in, the kind of night that seemed to hold its breath. Deep inside a dim chamber, lit only by flickering lamps, Lord Aldrich sat across from a trusted confidant. Days earlier, the king had stripped him of every title he once held, leaving him a shadow of the man who had walked palace halls with pride. Now his expression carried a mix of defiance, regret, and something darker. He leaned forward, his voice barely more than a low rumble as it echoed off the old wood panels. "Marina isn't as innocent as she seems," he muttered. "She's been down in the dirt with me, whether she likes it or not." The words hung in the room like a storm cloud, refusing to release its rain. Outside, wind pushed against the windows, as if the night itself wanted no part in the secrets unfolding within. This was more than a family dispute. It was a crack in the foundation of the crown, threatening to pull in figures far beyond the walls of the kingdom. Aldrich's fall had been a long, painful descent. Once celebrated for his military service and his loyalty to the throne, he became entangled in questionable circles and gatherings that earned whispers behind closed doors. Though he publicly denied wrongdoing, pressure mounted around him until the king, facing growing outrage, made his decision. Aldrich was stripped of his style, his honours, and his privileges, reduced to a private citizen, and moved from his residence to a smaller home under a limited guard. The world watched with shock, but inside the family, the true storm was only beginning. As his bitterness simmered, Aldrich used the private interview to vent old grievances. His remarks about Marina were not random. Years of tension had built between them. The interview, arranged through discreet channels, was intended to let him tell his side of the story. But as questions turned toward his past connections, his frustration spilled over. It wasn't just me in those rooms, he insisted. Others were there too, people who pretend they knew nothing. The cold could not quiet the unease that had settled over the royal household. The scandal surrounding Lord Aldrich was no longer a distant rumble but a storm stretching its fingers into every corridor. Servants whispered behind silver trays, advisers walked briskly with grave expressions, and guards exchanged worried looks. Even the palace itself, with its towering stone pillars and centuries of history, felt restless. Prince Wilhelm rose early that morning, long before the usual activity of the court began. Sleep had become a rare visitor, and when he did manage to close his eyes, his dreams were filled with echoes of his father's voice, papers shuffling, and Aldrich's bitter confession playing again and again in his mind. He crossed the long marble hallway leading to the royal conservatory, a place where he often sought clarity. Snow-dusted vines pressed against the glass walls, and fragile winter roses bloomed beneath the warmth of carefully placed lamps. He stood there in silence, hands clasped behind his back, heart heavy with responsibility. The kingdom looked to him now, even more than he had ever expected. His father, King Rowan, had grown increasingly frail as the months passed. The physicians assured the court that the king's condition was stable, but Wilhelm could see the signs. The slow steps, the faint tremor in his hands, the way he leaned slightly more on his cane each day. Rowan had ruled with dignity, but time had tightened its grip. Princess Celine entered quietly behind Wilhelm, her footsteps soft against the mosaic tiles. She wore a warm cloak of deep green velvet, lined with fur, her dark hair pinned loosely at the back of her head. She had always moved with a quiet confidence, a presence that felt like calm in the midst of chaos. Wilhelm didn't turn as she approached. He sensed her presence as naturally as he sensed the winter air around him. "You haven't slept," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "I could say the same for you." She stepped beside him, gazing out across the kingdom. Snow continued to fall, flakes drifting slowly toward the gardens below. "The council expects an announcement," she said. "They want to know whether Aldrich's words will be addressed publicly." Wilhelm exhaled through his nose. Everyone wants something. The court wants assurance, the public wants truth, and the press, Well, they want the flames to burn brighter. A path must be chosen, Celine replied. Silence can only last so long. Wilhelm knew she was right. Aldrich's confession had spread through the kingdom like wildfire. Though the palace refused to comment, speculation grew each day. And Marina, caught in the crossfire of Aldrich's bitterness, had become the center of unwanted attention. She and Prince Hale lived far away now, oceans apart from Ashbourne, but the shadows of the crown had a way of stretching even across seas. Wilhelm's jaw tightened. Aldrich's words were reckless. He spoke out of anger, not truth. Yet the damage has been done. Celine turned toward him, her eyes soft but firm. Then we must guide the kingdom through it. This is not a burden you carry alone. Wilhelm lowered his gaze, touched by her unwavering loyalty. Celine had stood by him through every storm, political upheaval, public unrest, and the delicate dance of royal duties. She was more than a princess. She was his partner in every sense. A soft knock echoed from the conservatory doors, and a palace attendant stepped inside. "Your Highness," he said with a respectful bow. "The king requests your presence in his private chambers." Wilhelm shared a brief glance with Celine. It was unusual for Rowan to summon them so early. Something must have changed. As they followed the attendant through the palace corridors, Wilhelm's heart thudded with a quiet dread. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, the air felt heavy and expectant. They reached the king's chambers. Rowan sat in a large armchair by the fire, wrapped in a deep burgundy robe. His silver-streaked hair fell softly around his temples, and though he appeared tired, there was a sharpness in his eyes that hadn't been there in weeks. "Father," Wilhelm said, bowing his head. Celine curtsied gracefully. Rowan gestured for them to come closer. "My children," he began, his voice steady but quieter than usual. "The kingdom is shifting beneath our feet. Aldrich's choices, Marina's name being pulled into the chaos, the unrest outside our gates, this would shake even the strongest monarchy. But it will not break ours." Wilhelm nodded. "We will address the council today. The public needs reassurance." Rowan's gaze lingered on him with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "It is more than reassurance we must offer. It is direction." Celine stepped forward. "What do you propose, Your Majesty?" The king drew a slow breath. "A transition." Wilhelm stiffened. "Father." "Listen," Rowan said, raising a hand. "My health is not what it once was. I have fought to maintain my duties, but the time is coming when the realm will need a steadier hand than mine. Wilhelm, you and Celine must begin assuming greater responsibility, not simply as future leaders, but as present guardians of the crown." Wilhelm felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders like fresh snow. "Are you speaking of abdication?" Rowan's expression softened. "Not yet. But I will soon announce that you are to oversee all state affairs under my guidance. A shared rule until the transition becomes official." Celine absorbed the news with calm understanding, but Wilhelm's heart raced. He had always known this moment would come, but the sudden closeness of it felt overwhelming. "What about Aldrich?" Wilhelm asked quietly. "The kingdom still demands answers." Rowan closed his eyes briefly, as if summoning strength. "Aldrich's claims must be addressed, but not directly. We will not fuel the fire. Instead, we focus on transparency and reform. We strengthen the crown not by chasing rumors, but by building faith." Wilhelm exchanged a thoughtful look with Celine. This was more than damage control. It was a new era. Before they could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Rowan's chief advisor entered, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, we have received word from Hale and Marina." Wilhelm straightened. "What message?" "They request an audience," the advisor replied. "They wish to speak with you both, in person." Celine blinked. "They want to return to Ashbourne." "Not return," the advisor clarified. "Visit." Wilhelm hesitated. Hale had always kept a respectful distance since stepping away from royal duties. Marina, too, preferred a quieter life. For them to willingly enter the storm, something must have changed. "Arrange it," Wilhelm said at last. The advisor bowed and left the room. Rowan gave a nod of approval. This meeting may help heal the fractures in our family, and the nation will take comfort in unity. Wilhelm hoped his father was right. But a strange knot formed in his stomach, a sense that Hale and Marina carried with them more than a desire for reconciliation. There was something they needed to say. Something important. That afternoon, the palace increased its security in preparation for their arrival. Guards lined the gates, and the courtyard was swept clean of snow. The air buzzed with anticipation. Shortly before sunset, a modest carriage approached the palace entrance. Wilhelm and Celine stood side by side under the grand archway as Hale stepped out first, pulling his cloak tightly around him against the cold. He looked older than Wilhelm remembered, though only by a few years. His eyes, once bright with youthful rebellion, now held a maturity forged by distance and life beyond the palace walls.